Hello everybody, Lo and Vic here, and today we are going to learn how to play Bloodborne, the board game from Cool Minis or Not. This is a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players, and we'll be going through a one-player version because the rules are exactly the same no matter what the player count is. We will start with the setup and then go through the rules of how to play this great new Kickstarter game. Let's dive in. Let's start with the setup. So first, choose one of the 4 campaigns from the box that you are going to play. Take the deck. In my case, I've chosen the Long Hunt campaign. Set it aside for now on the table and take the introduction card, which you can read to the players. On top of this deck, there are 3 chapter setup cards. And because we're playing chapter 1, we will need this setup card in just a moment. And the rest of those cards are numbered 1 through 60 in the case of this scenario, and you do not shuffle them. I will place the chapter card here. It will be of use for us later. Now, let's set up our hunter. In my one-player game, I will be using only one of those hunters. First, take the hunter dashboard and place it on the table. Then choose your hunter from the 4 available ones and take their trick weapon and place it on the hunter dashboard with any side visible. Find the firearm belonging to your hunter. You can identify it by the corresponding image and place it here. Put 6 health tokens into the HP pool of your hunter. Find the appropriate mini and insert it in the base of your hunter dashboard's collar. Take 1 player aid and place it somewhere nearby for assistance. And finally, create the basic hunter deck. This deck should consist of 12 cards with the word basic on top. We have 3 endurance cards in green. We have 3 strength cards, which are gray. There are also 3 cards with purple vitality symbols and 3 blue skill cards. Shuffle this deck and place it next to your hunter board. The next step is setting up the hunt board. Take the hunt board and place it on the table. Take the upgrade deck, place it next to the hunt board and deal out 4 cards into the 4 upgrade spaces. Take the turn marker and place it on the first field on the bottom of the hunt board. Take the Consumables deck, shuffle it and place it near the board. Take the rewards deck. You don't have to shuffle this as you will be choosing specific rewards, and place it nearby as well. Finally, you can lay out all of the tokens that you will need for the game. These are the frenzy tokens, poison tokens, the fog gates. These are the square ones. We have also 12 blood echo tokens, 8 consumable tokens, 7 NPCs, 5 survivor tokens, 15 insight tokens, 5 corpse tokens, 2 broken lamps, and 40 health tokens in easy reach for all the players. The last thing we need to do is to set up the monsters for our play. Take the chapter card you've set aside in the beginning and take a look at the list of enemies. Find the enemies listed on the chapter setup card, shuffle them, and place them in the enemy spaces with a random side up. In the case of chapter 1 for the Long Hunt, these are the Hunter Mob, Scourge Beast, and Huntman's Minion. Find the enemy action deck, which consists of 6 cards, 2 specials, 3 basics, and 1 ability. Shuffle it and place it near the enemies. take a look at the chapter card again and locate all the tiles listed on the chapter card. For this first chapter, these are the ransacked house, the Odeon chapel, the occupied house, and the courtyard lamp. You can identify those by the name printed on the tiles themselves. Apart from those 4 tiles, you need to randomly select from the tiles 2 tiles per player. In my case, for a single player game, these will be only 2, to a maximum of 6. So I've already added the 2, so we have a deck of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 map tiles. Shuffle them and place them face down next to the play area. Finally, locate the central lamp map tile and place it face up in the play area. This is where you place all your hunter miniatures at the beginning of the game. On the other side of the chapter 1 setup, we have the information about the start of the hunt and the conditions for furthering the story. The start of the hunt says to reveal card 1, which is what we are going to do. We place this mission card face up next to the play area. You can read the story and also the conditions for revealing the next cards, and place this chapter card with those conditions face up in the designated area on the hunt board. Okay guys, so it's time to learn some rules. We've got the setup completed and we can start. The first question is how to win the game. Now, to win the game you have to complete a hunt mission. A hunt mission usually shows up at the start of a chapter. In the case of chapter 1, the first card is the hunt mission, and it tells you to end a move on the central lamp tile after you have collected at least 2 insights. And then you reveal another card that it tells you to reveal, and this will be the final mission to complete, or the final stage of the mission to complete. So every single time you play a chapter and complete a hunt mission, you win the chapter, you can progress to the next one. Now, when do you lose the game? This tracker moves through this board along the progress of your game, and once it reaches the last space, that means that you have the one final round to try and complete the hunt mission. If you don't complete the hunt mission when this tracker is on this last space, you lose the game, and no matter which chapter you are in, the first, second or third, you have to start the whole campaign from the beginning. So if you lose in the 3rd chapter, well, tough luck. Okay, let's reset this and let's look at the turn order and how to go through individual players' turns. Okay, so here we are. We've got everything set up for a 1-player game, and like I said, the differences for 2, 3 or 4-player games are just that the bosses have more energy and the players move interchangeably in their turns, so that basically everything looks the same. Let's start with how the turn sequence looks like. Now, a turn for a single player means that the player can perform their actions and then the enemies activate for that player only. And after this happens, the second player, if we are playing with more than one, goes, the third one, the fourth one potentially, and then the whole round is over. So what can you do within a single player turn with your actions? Well, first you start your player turn by shuffling your hunter deck and drawing up to 3 cards from it. 1, 2, 3. Now, if you have any left over from the previous round, you can either decide to keep them and draw to a maximum of 3, or you can discard any of the ones that you have still remaining in your hand, but you start every single turn with 3 cards. Now, I drew those 3 basic cards. I've got 1 strength, I've got 1 with stagger, and I've got 1 that allows me to draw 1 card. All right. And what you do with those cards is basically that for every action that you want to perform in the game, you have to pay, you have to discard one of those cards from your hand. So usually you will be able to do 3 things during a turn. Sometimes you can draw additional cards and can do more during your turn thanks to that, but this is the usual amount. Now let's talk about the actions. The player aid gives you a pretty good overview of what actions are available to a player during a single turn. You have an information that each action uses 1 card, and this is attack, move to, interact, transform weapon, go to hunter's dream. And let's go through those one by one, but maybe not in this particular order. Let's start with the move action. Now when you move, you have to discard 1 card. I will discard stagger, for example, and my hunter can move 2 areas. Now an area is a piece of the map tile separated by lines. So this middle area is 1 and those edge areas are 1 as well. So I can move, for example, 1 here and use one of those exits, or exactly this exit, to move an additional 1. Or I can, for example, from here move to the exit automatically with 1 movement and have 1 spare. Now, if you move with your movement through an exit, you will be adding the top tile from the deck to the neighboring area so that to connect the exits, but if you decided to move, you cannot retreat from this movement. So, for example, if I wanted to move with 1 movement through this exit and I would add this tile, then I would have to end my movement here. And now I could decide whether I want to retreat with my second movement or maybe stay and finish my movement or use my second movement here. But if I went this way and I wasted my 1 movement for this, then the second one would have to be here and I wouldn't have a choice. And now when you add those tiles to the map, there are a few things that you have to do. First, you look for those consumable tokens and you place the consumables here so that we can pick them up later, and then you look at the icons corresponding to the icons above the enemies and you place those enemies accordingly. So this brownish one is for the hunter mob, so they are here, and this claw purple one is for the huntsman's minion, and he is here. That's not a good start. I would waste my 1 movement to move here and I would probably retreat. This is not ideal for a start of a single player game, definitely. Now there are a few limitations when it comes to movement and populating tiles and stuff like that. If you reveal a tile and you would have to populate it with an enemy and you don't have any miniatures left because all of them are in use, then you move the furthest away miniature from any player and you spawn it in the new place. If a player moves from an area where the enemies already are present, those enemies are said to be in pursuit. Now what that means is that if a hunter ever exits a space containing enemies, so for example I would move 1 to here with my next movement, those enemies would pursue me by moving 1 area along my path. They wouldn't move directly to me, they only move 1 area always, so you have a chance to escape, but they are in pursuit. And this happens to only the player who is the active player, whose turn it currently is. Now, if at any point in the game you draw a tile and you cannot put it in any way that any exit would be connected, all exits would be blocked, you can just put this tile, shuffle it back into the deck and draw a new one. And if a tile, for example, is being forced to be connected like this, then this means that you can't move through here because this exit is blocked. One last thing connected to movement is that those named locations that you have here on the chapter card are connected to those insights that we've mentioned when talking about the hunt mission and how to finish the game. Now, for example, my Long Hunt Chapter 1 mission says that if I end a move on the ransacked house tile, I would have to reveal card 12. So if I ended my movement here, I would go to the deck, I would reveal card number 12, I would read the story, and I would get a task description of what to do with this mission. And this is called an insight mission. And when you finish an insight mission, you get 1 insight token, and you can collect them here on the hunt mission. And in here, I can see that I need 2 insights in order to progress in my hunt mission. I have 3 insights to collect, so any 2 of them that I am able to finish would give me the required amount for the hunt mission. Okay, so this is basically the movement. Now let's see what else I can spend my cards on. The other thing that I can do by paying my cards is interact. And if at any time a player is standing on an area where you have those consumable tokens, you may spend 1 card to interact with 1 or all of those tokens. So I could collect both of them if I spend only 1 card. I can also collect 1 and I can leave the other one to another player. No problem. Sometimes mission cards also require you to interact with a specific map tile. In this case, if you interact with the map tile for the purpose of the mission, you can also interact with those tokens at the same time, provided you are on a space that contains them. This is all very good. However, there is one caveat to that. If you ever decide or are forced to interact while standing on an area with enemies, you can do it, sure. But then the enemies present, and each one of them in this case, will attack you. And you won't have a chance to retaliate. You won't have a chance to dodge. You just have to take the damage as is. So, you can't really go around poking into others' lockers or cupboards while there are enemies lurking about. So this is the second action, interacting. I will take back my 3 cards because I'm not really using them right now. I'm just using them to demonstrate what's happening. And the next thing is transforming your weapon. And I mean this trick weapon that you have here. Now, transforming means flipping it to the other side, like so. You will notice that the skill and the abilities of those weapons differ on both sides. What you will also see is that on the bottom of the weapon, you have the highlights of the skills from the other side, so you can plan your moves accordingly ahead. Now, if you decide to transform your weapon and spend 1 card on this, you flip the weapon and you also clear away all the cards that have been placed on that weapon earlier. This is one of the only ways to remove those cards from a weapon, so you'll be transforming quite often, not only to adjust your strategy accordingly, but also to be able to use those trick weapons at all. One but last thing is that you can go to the Hunter's Dream when you spend a card. Now, going to a Hunter's Dream is a bit different than anything else, because this allows you at any time to remove yourself from the map. Go to the Hunter's Dream, where you will heal your HP to the maximum. You'll be able to take off all the cards from your trick weapon and from your discard pile and return them back to your hand, just creating this new deck of 12 cards. You'll be able to refresh your Hunter Pistol, and you will also be able to spend all your Blood Echoes. Now, Blood Echoes are tokens that you get for killing enemies. If you manage to give the final blow to an enemy, you get a Blood Echo. You can have maximum of 3 of those on each character. And when you go to the Hunter's Dream, you have to discard those Blood Echoes and you take as many upgrade cards as you've discarded of those tokens. Now, each time you take 1 card, you put another one in from the upgrade deck, and you can take this new card as your next one. And after you do that, you don't have to, but you can exchange any of your cards from your deck of 12 for those new upgraded cards. But your deck for the game only consists of 12 cards, no more, no less. All the other cards that you collect are kept separately next to the board, and they can be exchanged during the next hunter's dream, for example, or a preparation for the next chapter. They're yours to command. Now, what else happens when you go to the hunter's dream is that you advance the turn track by 1. And this doesn't mean the same as advancing it at the end of the round. If, for example, during a round, every hunter goes to the hunter's dream, the turn track will advance 4 times. So you have to be very careful when you do that. And during the next round, your hunter will come back on any space with a lantern icon, and you'll be able to put your trick weapon to any of those sides you wish to start the game with. Okay, so we've discussed everything, basically. We've discussed everything connected to the actions apart from attacking. Now, attacking is the final thing that you can do when you are on an area with an enemy, or when an enemy attacks you for any reason and you can defend yourself. You have to spend 1 card from your hand, but not discard it, just put it in any of those attack slots on your trick weapon. Now, what does that do is that it activates a certain attack. So, for example, if I put this card here, it will tell me that my attack has a speed of 2, those are those arrows on top. It will deal 2 damage to a creature, and it will allow me to draw 1 card. So I would be able to refill my hand. Now, after we do this, then you have to take the enemy action deck and you have to draw 1 card as well. And this card can say either basic, special, or ability. And depending on what it says, you have to resolve the attack of the enemy. So let's say that I was attacking these guys, the mob, and they have a basic attack as well. So as you can see, they have speed 2 and damage 2. I have speed 2 and damage 2 as well, which means that we both attack simultaneously, and they would take 2 damage. They have 4 health, so that doesn't kill them, but I would take 2 damage as well. Now you will ask, is there a way to avoid this damage? Well, yes, there is. If at any time you are being attacked and you suffer damage and you want to avoid it, and you have this card that says dodge, in any configuration, the word is dodge, you would be able to place this card on a second attack field, any of those, and you would be able to avoid the attack. The only rule is that this dodge card has to be placed in an area, in an ability that is faster or equally fast than the attack of the enemy. So in this case, I would be only able to put it in this first area where I have 3 arrows, because this attack from the hunter's mob is at speed of 2. I wouldn't be able to put it here because this is a slower ability. It has a speed of only 1. And in this case, those hunter mob wouldn't attack me completely, but I would then attack them and deal them 2 damage. And as you can see, this dodge card ability has this clear this slot. So after the attack, I would be able to discard this card and this slot can be used again. And in this case, I would be able to attack, for example, for a second time if I had any cards. So I would be able to, let's say, go with this. And this is a basic attack as well. It has a speed of 3. I have damage of 1 and +1, so I would attack them for 2. I would draw another enemy activation card. This one says special, and their special has a speed of 1, but damages me with 4 and stuns. But my attack is quicker, it's 3, and I deal them 2 damage. So this 2 additional damage, plus the 2 from the previous attack, is enough to kill them. They would go off the board, I would get 1 blood echo to a maximum of 3, and that's it. As you can see, 2 areas here are already taken. So if I wanted to prepare for another attack very quickly, I would either have to discard 1 card to transform my weapon, which would basically mean this, and you have to flip it. You can't leave it on the same side, or I would have to go to the Hunter's Dream, and then I would be able to rebuild my deck from the bottom up. Now, if at any time during the game this enemy action deck is depleted, it has only 6 cards. You just take all of them, shuffle them, and put it back here. Now, the last thing worth mentioning when we're talking about attack is what happens when you get killed, when your hunter is slain. Very simple. If you lose all your health, you just appear in the Hunter's Dream, and all the rules apply that are connected to the Hunter's Dream, and I've mentioned previously, with one exception. You would advance the token 1 turn ahead, you would replenish your health, refresh your gun, you would be able to clear out your cards and form a new deck of 12, but you would have to take all your blood echoes and remove them from your board, but you wouldn't be able to choose any upgrade cards because, well, you died. You didn't go to the Hunter's Dream willingly. So after refreshing everything, after advancing the turn, you would be able to return on the next round with any side of the trick weapon up to any lamp icon, and that's it. So the only punishment for being killed is that when you go to the Hunter's Dream, you do not get to upgrade anything of what you've collected. Okay, so this is the basic overview of what you can do as a player during your round. So let's reiterate very quickly. You can move. This is a maximum of 2 spaces of movement, and you have to spend 1 card from your hand for this. You can attack, not discarding a card but placing it on your trick weapon. You can interact with objects or tiles, you can transform your weapon, or you can willingly go to the Hunter's Dream in order to refresh your health, refresh your cards, and upgrade your deck. Now, what happens when you don't want to or don't have any more cards in your hand to spend for any of those actions? Well, because you can keep some of those cards to be able to defend yourself during the enemy activation, or you can keep them for the next round. And exactly that. If you don't want to do anything else, or you can't, the enemies activate. And what happens when the enemies activate is, first you have to determine which enemies activate, and all the enemies that are on the same tile as the hunter or 1 tile away, so in this case this one, would activate. And they have to move 1 space towards the hunter along the shortest route, and if they end their movement on the same area as the hunter, they would attack. Now, some enemies, for example, Scourge Beasts, say that they have 2 movement when they are, in the Scourge Beast case, pursuing, or maybe activating or something else, but usually enemies move 1. And those enemies who are activated are only activated from tiles connected to the tile where the hunter is. So if there is no connection through an entry point, then those enemies, even if they are 1 tile away, they wouldn't activate. You have to remember about that. The order of activation for those enemies is as follows here, from the left to right. And when the enemies finish their movement, if the enemy is in the same tile, they will attack, and the attack is exactly the same as the one shown during the player turn. So the player would choose which card to place for an attack, the enemies would draw an enemy activation, and you would assign damage. Now, if you don't have any cards in your hand or any empty slots here, you would just have to take the damage. If the only card that you have in your hand is the dodge card, you could, for example, decide not to attack, but wait for the enemy activation card to show up and then decide that you want to dodge the attack. The choice is up to you. And after the enemy activation is done, the player's turn is done, the next player in line goes. If this was the last player for this round, then the round ends, and when the new round starts, the turn tracker moves 1 ahead. Each player can discard as many cards from their hand as they want, if they have any left over. You shuffle the remaining deck, draw up to 3 cards, and continue. And this goes on until you finish the hunt mission, or until the turn tracker goes to the end and you've unfortunately failed. Now, let's talk for a moment about consumables and other cards that you can obtain during the game. Now, I've told you that consumables can be obtained by interacting with those tokens, with those green tokens on the board, when you are ever able to interact with those green icons on the map, you draw as many consumables from the deck as you need. And you don't add them to your hand, you place them next to your player board. These are one-time use items that you can use at any time described on those cards. Like, for example, during a hunter's turn, teleport your hunter to any lantern space, or on attack, add +1 damage, and after you use them, you just discard them. So they're pretty straightforward to use. Now, a different set of cards are the reward cards. The reward cards are received for completing insight missions or hunt missions, and you will be able to, once you get this reward card, you are able to give it to any of the players. Anyone can use it, so it's not only the player who is active right now. Those reward cards come in two forms. We have the hunter tools and we have carol runes. So hunter tools look, for example, like this, and they have the description on the other side, and you put them like this next to your player board, and the carol rune has a different wording description, and you place it like this as well. Now, each player, each character can only have 2 tools and 2 runes at the same time. So if you, for example, have already 2 tools and you receive another one, you can either exchange one of yours for the new one, or you can hand it to any other player. So you can distribute those tools and runes as you want. And these are different from consumables, so that after you use them, they become flipped, exhausted. And when you enter the hunter's dream, you collect all the discarded cards, you refresh your health, you also refresh all of those tools and runes at your disposal. So they are here for you to keep. Now, when you are playing a chapter from a campaign, all of those runes or tools collected by you throughout the chapter or throughout the campaign remain with you until the end of this campaign. So during the setup for the next chapter, you can redistribute those, you can start using the ones that you set aside because nobody wanted to use them in the previous chapter or something like that. They are always available for you. This is your loot. And the last thing that is treated somewhat as a consumable or like a tool is this hunter pistol. Now, you'll be able to upgrade those, collect new ones during the game, but this one has a basic attack, basic action. When an enemy makes a basic attack, automatically stagger that enemy, and if you use it, you flip it. And you have 2 options. Either you will refresh it when you enter the hunter's dream, or if you discard 1 card, you can refresh it. It's written here. Some pistols have different conditions for refreshing. Some of them you can't refresh otherwise than going into the hunter's dream. It all depends. Okay, this is almost all. We're almost at the end of the explanation. What else do you need to know is that on the other side of the player aids, you've got explanations for the keywords effects, and those are things that can be connected to your character or the enemy during a game. Things like dodge, for example, and I've already explained how dodge works during an attack. You can also stagger an enemy, and here if you use stagger, any card with the stagger keyword, then you can stagger an enemy, so cancel an attack of an enemy that has a slower speed than your attack. In the case of dodge, you can dodge an attack that's equal or lower in speed than yours. In the case of stagger, the enemy's attack has to be slower than yours, it can't be equal. A hunter can also get stunned. If they get stunned, that just means that they have to discard 1 card, or if they can't discard because they don't have any cards on hand, they suffer 1 damage, and that's an immediate. Hunters can also go into frenzy by some effects. You gain 1 frenzy token, and the hunter who has this frenzy token suffers +1 damage from all attacks. And you remove this token only when the hunter goes into the dream for any reason, dead or willingly. And poison works somewhat the same. You get a token, you're poisoned, and you suffer 1 damage at the end of each of your rounds, and you remove it when you go into the hunter's dream. So those effects are clearly described on the other side of the player aid. They're easy to find. Remember, just one more thing, that those tokens aren't cumulative. You can only have 1 frenzy token and 1 poison token on you at any time. Now, what are those other tokens for? Because I've told you about the consumables, the HP is obvious insights and those frenzy and poison tokens as well. Now we also have a few tokens to mark survivors, and those are connected to the insight or hunt missions, and you usually have to take this token through interacting with it or something like that and carry it to a different space. We also have some corpse tokens which work similarly. We can have some fog tokens and those cancelled lantern tokens. I'll talk about them in a moment. And we've got a few NPCs. And those tokens, those NPC tokens, work similarly to enemies. But when the mission tells you, you can place an NPC on any board and they get a card like this as well, and you put it somewhere close, somewhere nearby, you will be able to fight this NPC and you will be using the card. And those cards for the NPCs are both two-sided. One side is for 1-2 players and the other side is for 3-4 players. The other side, this side for more players, has more health. So be careful which side you're operating during your game. And the bosses look pretty similar as well, with the only rule that when you are fighting a boss, they have two phases, and this is a boss card with phase 1 and phase 2. They have a different health for a different number of players on both sides, and when you apply damage equal to or greater to the boss's maximum health, the card gets flipped to phase 2. The excessive damage from phase 1 does not get carried over, and once you kill the boss in phase 2, you win the game. Now, the bosses have their own deck of cards for activations for phase 1 and phase 2. So when you are attacking the boss, you draw a card from the phase deck appropriate for that boss, and you have the information about the attack and the description of what happens. And you go through this deck of phase 1 or phase 2, depending on where you are in the fight. And the last two things that I need to tell you about in this game are the resetting of the map and the fog gates and how they work. So let's start with the resetting. Every once in a while, this token traveling through the turn track will cross this red area. Now, when it comes into this red area, that means that the map resets in the way that you have to take all of the non-boss enemies off the map. So, for example, if these two were here and this was the boss, let's say, I would be taking these two off. I would replenish all of the consumable tokens back on the map, so all the unused would be left alone, but all the used ones would come back so that we have more consumables to go around. I would first replenish all enemies on missions, if I have any, and some missions have this exact wording that on this icon refresh the enemy on a specific field, and this is what would happen right now. And after this I would refresh all those spawn fields. So basically what this means is that wherever the minions would have moved and roaming the map, when this token resets to red, those roaming minions that were pursuing you, chasing you, going after, would just disappear and return to where they came from. It might make things easier, it might make things more difficult. And the last thing that you do is also that you refresh the health of bosses. You don't change the phase back to phase 1, for example, if the boss was in phase 2, but the boss will heal to their maximum for a given phase. So you would have to attack him and try to damage him from the start. Now this can happen, this reset can happen when you are finishing a round and you are advancing the token to start a new round, but it can also happen when you go into the dream because you, for example, were killed, or because you wanted to go into the dream voluntarily, because the first thing that you do in the dream is you advance this token one space ahead every single time. So you have to be careful when you do that, because resetting the map can be a good idea and can also lead to tragic consequences. Now, when this token reaches the last space, you have one last turn, as I mentioned earlier, to win the game, but during this last turn, this token would would have to be advanced more because of the Hunter's Dream or something else. Now, when that happens, you don't move the token, but you reset the map again and again and again. Okay, and sometimes sometimes the mission card will tell you to cover some of those map tiles with fog gates. The wording is exactly surround a specific tile with fog gates and spawn an enemy or something like that. Now when that happens, you take those fog gate tiles and you surround the tile with fog gates. You also cover this lantern token with an X, so as long as there are those fog gates, this lantern token doesn't work. That means that you cannot, if you're in a hunter's dream, you cannot come back to this space automatically. Now fog gates have some limitations that are introduced during the game. This usually happens, by the way, when there is some kind of a boss or a mini boss fight or some fight key to a mission or something like that. Now, while a tile is surrounded with fog gates, hunters can enter the tile from any neighboring entry point, but they cannot leave. So this is the first limitation. The second limitation is that this lamp cannot be used to teleport into this space automatically from Hunter's Dream or by other means. The next limitation is that enemies cannot enter or exit through those fog gates, so even pursuing enemies. So if you were escaping an enemy and entering a tile with a fog gate, then any enemies pursuing you would have to stop here. They wouldn't be able to come after you. And while the fog gates are active, enemies that are not listed on the mission card that created those fog gates do not spawn on the tile. So any additional respawns or anything like that wouldn't occur on this tile. And those fog gates are removed once you kill the enemy that caused them to appear, the enemy from the mission card. And the last thing to say is that, well, if you're lucky enough not to die too many times, and you manage to complete the mission before your timer runs out, you finish the chapter, you can either move to the other chapter automatically, or you can save your progress and come back to this next time for the next session. If you want to continue automatically, you take the second chapter setup card and you choose the enemies, the tiles, and follow any special rules that might be written. For example, uncover card number 17 in this case, or something like that. You keep all of those tools and runes that you've collected during the previous chapter. You can redistribute them among players. You reset your health. You clear out your deck. You can go back to the basic deck of 12 cards, or you can use any upgrades that you've collected throughout the game, but you can't exchange those upgrades between other players. The ones you've collected for yourself, for your blood echoes, are only yours to modify the deck with. And you basically set up the next chapter for continuation of the game. So this is it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that it helped you figure out what the rules are for this great game of Bloodborne, the board game. I hope you enjoy this game very much. The people who are still waiting for the Kickstarter, if there are any, some patience. The game is great, and as soon as you get it, you will enjoy it thoroughly, I am sure. If you're not sure whether to buy it or not, I hope that this video helped you decide. If still not, then I'll be posting some kind of a review or an opinion video pretty soon. If you liked my explanation and you liked this video, click the subscribe button, give me a like, hit the notifications in order to be notified about all of the other videos that are coming up to my channel, Lone Vic. There are also links in the description for this video to other of my social media like Instagram and Facebook. You'll find me there as well with some interesting photos, informations and texts about board games and things connected with the world of board games. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time. This was Lone Vic with an explanation of how to play Bloodborne, the board game.